Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I'm reviewing Pride by Ibi Zoboi. This is a young adult Pride and Prejudice retelling that was published in 2018, or as it says on the cover, a Pride and Prejudice remix. It's a retelling, alright? It has all the features we expect from a young adult Pride and Prejudice retelling. It's got family drama, it has first love, it has a good dose of teenage angst. The setting is modern-day New York City, more precisely, modern-day Brooklyn, more precisely, modern-day Bushwick. And yes, the distinction is in fact explained in the book. As someone who set foot in Brooklyn exactly once, many years ago, and was jet-lagged for the entire 3 days of that visit, I absolutely have no concept of Bushwick or of Brooklyn, and only a very vague concept of New York City at all. So I'll just have to take the author's word for it that living in Bushwick is not the same as living in somewhere else in Brooklyn. We follow 17-year-old Zuri Benitez, who lives in Bushwick with her parents and, yes, 4 sisters. Well, 3 sisters, because her oldest sister, Jane, is already off to college, though at the beginning of the book she returns to the family home for her summer break. But the neighborhood is changing, and it all starts with the very wealthy Darcy family moving in across the street from the Benitez. Soon, Zuri and her sisters meet the very rich, very uptight, somewhat full of themselves Darcy brothers, Ainsley and Darius, and things get a bit complicated from there. Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice is about society. Yes, it's about love and it's about family, but it's primarily about how people live together in a society and have to find their place within that society, and about the complications of people essentially not staying in their lane in society. This is exemplified by, of course, Lady Catherine, who's outraged at the very thought that her nephew might be falling for someone that she sees as completely beneath themselves. This is also exemplified by Lydia, whose affair causes a massive scandal. This is exemplified by the very notion that because Mr. and Mrs. Bennet don't have any sons, they're going to have to find alternate arrangements for their daughters' futures. Translating those very complicated and very delicate Regency society details into the modern day is going to be a challenge for any author. But I have to say that Ibi Zoboi managed to translate those into the 21st century in a really clever and interesting way, by having the setting be this very close-knit neighborhood that is at the same time obviously part of an enormous world city. At the beginning of the book, Zuri is very comfortable in this society of Bushwick. She really fits in to her family, to her neighborhood, and in fact it is Darcy, or specifically Darius's arrival in the neighborhood, that shakes things up, because he in this book is very much a symbol of gentrification. He moves to Bushwick from Manhattan. He goes to a really fancy and very expensive and very exclusive boarding school. No, not boarding school, private school. And yeah, maybe he does think that he's better than the Benitez sisters, whose parents are Haitian and Dominican respectively, and who've barely even set a foot outside of Brooklyn. There's a scene in which Zuri recounts, basically on one hand, the few times that she's left the States to go to other states, which I found fascinating, because with Darius you get the idea that he's very worldly and well-travelled. At the same time, he is the outsider in this neighborhood, and to have that conflict, not just between him and Zuri, which is obviously the romantic conflict that we know and love from Pride and Prejudice, but to also see him as an outsider in this society and trying to cope with that is a fascinating extra layer that the author added to this modern day retelling to really give it its own character. Zuri is a fantastic updated version of Elizabeth. In particular, that mixture of embarrassment and protectiveness when it comes to her family. She cringes so hard at the antics of her younger sisters, Layla and Kayla, who are this edition's version of Lydia and Kitty. They're also twins in this, which I think just amps up the chaos and mischief whenever they're in the scene. So she's really embarrassed by them, but at the same time, when Layla gets in a bit of trouble, no spoilers here, but if you've read Pride and Prejudice, you know what I'm talking about, she's incredibly protective of her, and I think that's such a realistic family dynamic that we see in Pride and Prejudice as well. Because yes, in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth is not too fond of the impression that her family makes in society. But at the same time, the moment that Darcy dares to insult them, she's a Bennet through and through. And it's the same that we see with Zuri Benitez and her protectiveness of her family and of her life and of her neighborhood. Ibi Zoboi also makes her main character a poet in this, which can go either way in a book if you make the main character a poet. In this case, it kind of works, because interspersed with the plot chapters, we also have poems that are written in universe by Zuri that show her processing the events of the story. I'm not a huge fan of poetry, but I still really enjoyed those little intermissions to really get into the head of the main character. I thought that was quite nicely done. The book, for the most part, follows the story beats of Pride and Prejudice. So if you're familiar with Pride and Prejudice, it's really fun to see how the book takes that plot and updates it. I have read a few young adult retellings of Jane Austen novels where that's not the case, where the retelling pretty much takes the premise of a Jane Austen novel, updates that, and then goes from there. But Pride really is a true adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, and you can tell that the author knows and loves Pride and Prejudice in the way that she inserted references to Jane Austen's writing throughout the book. It works incredibly well. This is by far one of the best YA retellings of a Jane Austen novel that I've read. And if you are interested in YA retellings of Jane Austen novels as a genre, this is an incredibly good place to start. It's really clever, it's funny, it's well written. The prose is stunning throughout. Well, both the prose and the poetry in the book are really well done. And it's exactly what you want in a young adult retelling. It takes Jane Austen's story and it transports it into a different context that still works because the author kept those dynamics at the heart of the story the same. So this is pretty much an unconditional recommendation from me. I really like this and I'm going to explore more of Ibi Zoboi's writing. I hope she's done a few more Jane Austen retellings. I don't know if she has, but if she did, then they are definitely going to end up on my TBR. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you thought about Pride by Ibi Zoboi in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.